Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the El Cajon City Council meeting. The meeting is called to order, and I'd like to ask our city clerk to please call the roll.
All council members are present.
Would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and then remain standing for a brief moment of silence afterwards? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The city clerk posted orders of adjournment of the June 14th, 2022 meeting and the agenda of the June 28th, 2022 meeting in accordance with state law, council, and housing authority policy. We have one presentation on today's agenda. I'd like to invite our Deputy Director of Public Works, Mario Sanchez, to come and tell us all about this. Hi, Mario.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor and council members. Today I'm here to talk about our summary of our Bike to Work Day. Our Bike to Work Day was held in May, and it's our 22nd consecutive year that we've held a pit stop. So we've been around since about year 2000, since the inception of the Bike to Work Day here in the county of San Diego. And our sponsor is Sandag. They host all the pit stops in the county. And I'm just going to give a couple presentations, brief presentations on the slides.
Great.
So this is the summary of the county. We had more than 6,800 pit stops, or pit stop visits around the county, and the cooler weather allowed for more people to visit over the 100 pit stops from Oceanside to Lakeside to the San Ysidro border. And at the pit stops, participants received a free T-shirt along with a brand new San Diego Regional Bike Map, and were encouraged to explore new miles or bikeways throughout the region. There's over 1,700 miles of bikeways in the county. And this is a summary of our pit stop. El Cajon PD were gracious to come by and visit the stop, have some coffee and some refreshments. And our co-sponsor was the San Diego, our co-host was the San Diego County Library, and they helped us out, hand out T-shirts and so forth. At the end of the day, or at the end of the morning, we had over 60 bicyclists attend the city's pit stop. We normally get about 60 to 75 per year, so it was a good turnout. We even had a retired postal worker that came out of retirement for one day to pick up goodies. And with that, I'd like to thank our co-host again, the San Diego County Library, Gina Bravo and her staff, and a special thank you to our Public Works Operations staff that helped us set up all the canopies and the tables, and our staff as well. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm here.
Thanks, Mario. Let me see if there's any questions or comments. Thanks for the good work. And did you ride your bike to work?
No, I actually I'm the host of the pit stop, so that's my responsibility. Otherwise, I'd be cycling to work.
All right.
That day.
Thanks, Mario.
You're welcome.
All right, we're at agenda changes. Staff, do you have any agenda changes?
Mr. Mayor, we have no changes to the agenda, but I would like to let the council know that Ms. Barbara Luck from our law firm is representing us today for legal counsel.
Welcome, Barbara. Council, any agenda changes? Okay. That brings us then to consent items. Consent items are routine matters enacted by one motion, according to the recommendation listed below. With the concurrence of the City Council, a council member or person in attendance may request discussion on a consent item at this time. Council members, do you wish to pull any of the consent items? Steve?
Pull number 4.
Number 4. Okay. Staff, do you want to pull any of the consent items?
No, sir.
Let's go ahead and look at number 4 then.
Number 4 is the street sweeping services. Just a quick comment. That particular market is being consolidated a lot through acquisitions, which means there's less competition, which means the cost for contracts is going up. And this particular company, just because I'm aware of my neighborhood, the taxpayers aren't getting their money's worth. And I'll just kind of say they're not really going where they're supposed to be going when they're supposed to be doing it. So I've had some conversation with the city manager. He's aware, and he's sympathetic to making sure the taxpayers get their money's worth. So I think he has on his long-term view perhaps bringing that service back in-house. But certainly we want to let our street sweeping services know that they need to step up their game for the taxpayers of El Cajon. Thank you. With that, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the consent item.
Before the vote, though, I'd like to ask our city manager, why are we paying retroactive prevailing wages?
There was a recent ruling that street sweeping contractors should actually be a prevailing wage job. We had not been paying that in the past, so that money's been reserved in the event we need to pay that.
All right, is that a state ruling?
Correct.
Thank you. Okay. Steve, would you be comfortable making a motion to approve the entire consent item? Oh, okay. Is that what you did? All right, thanks. So moved and seconded, please vote.
And for the record, we have no speaker cards on this item, and motion carries by unanimous vote.
All right, we're now at public comment. At this time, any person may address a matter within the jurisdiction of the City Council, Housing Authority, successor agency to the El Cajon Redevelopment Agency that is not on the agenda. Comments relating to items on today's agenda are to be taken at the time the item is heard. State law prohibits discussion or action on items not on the agenda. However, City Council and Housing Authority members may briefly respond to statements or questions. An item, of course, may be placed on a future agenda. Angela, do we have speaker cards for this?
No speaker cards, sir.
Okay. That brings us then to written communications. There are no written communications on today's agenda. And we jump ahead to public hearings. We have one item to consider. Item 5 is the fiscal year 2022 through 2023 annual city budget, Housing Authority and successor agency budget. And I'll ask our staff to introduce this item. Hello, Clay. Nice.
You have no idea how much trouble that just got me in. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor.
I thought it was like a visual aid. I thought you were going to tell us people that's how people feel about the budget this year.
I appreciate that. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, distinguished members of the City Council. My name is Clay Shane. I'm the Director of Finance for the City of El Cajon. We're here today to continue our presentation of the FY23 proposed budget. For today's presentation, we're going to start with some unfinished business from our June 14th presentation and briefly check in on CalPERS and the status of our POB. From there, we'll jump into general fund reserves, detailed on the general fund as far as revenues and expenditures, briefly touch on the wastewater fund and the other operating funds of the city, spend some time discussing grants management, capital improvement projects, some questions and any discussion necessary, and then at the end we will ask for adoption of the budget. So jumping right in with the POB and CalPERS, in the spring of 2021, the city issued $147 million of POBs, pension obligation bonds. This was based on the most recent CalPERS actuarial valuation at the time, which was dated June 30th, 2019. At that point in time, we had a total unfunded accrued liability of $207 million. So we issued bonds to basically refinance 3/4 of that amount. Since then, the June 30th, 2020 valuation was released. Usually they're about a year behind. That was in July of 2021. At that time, that year's assessment, the unfunded liability had grown to $225.6 million. I share this slide with two thoughts. One, the pension obligation bonds were issued in 2021, so as of the 6/30/20 valuation, it had not happened yet, and we'll see that reflected in the next valuation we expect to get this fall. And then also just a reminder that just because you refinance debt doesn't make it go away. So in one form or another, we still have the same amount of debt. When the bonds were being considered, our financial advisor, Urban Futures, presented this table. In fact, we spent a lot of time discussing this table, and I won't cover the whole thing, but I do want to draw attention to one column, and it's the column to the right of the pink column, and those are the savings we were projecting to experience as a result of issuing the bonds. At the time, the total unfunded liability was $207 million, and by taking this action, we expected to save a total of $104.7 million over the life of the bonds. Specifically, want to draw attention to the second value in that column. That is the projected savings for fiscal year 2023. And we were anticipating at the time to save approximately $1.5 million as a result of issuing the bonds. Part of that was the strategy we adopted. We were very careful that we wanted to get the maximum bang for the buck, and that meant paying off those amortization layers that were the longest lived. And if you notice, those projected savings grow significantly starting in the next 2 or 3 years. With each year's of valuations come additional amortization layers, sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad, just depending on the events of that year. At the time that the POBs were issued, the 6/30/19 valuation was the most current. And at that time, the projected contribution for the UAL for FY23 next year was $18.1 million. As a result of the issuing the POBs, that contribution dropped to $7.4 million. And of course, we picked up approximately $9.1 million of debt service for the POBs themselves. So as a result of taking that action, we went from an $18.1 million contribution to $16.6 million, and that's where the $1.5 million in savings came from. However, I do also want to take an opportunity to bring this to your attention. The 6/30/20 valuation added approximately $18 million to our debt, and for the FY23 amortization, that increased our contributions by about $1.2 million. So after the most recent valuation, our total UAL contributions, including the POB debt service, basically dropped from what would have been $19.3 million to $17.7 million, or approximately $1.5 million. As I mentioned a moment ago, we expect to receive the June 30th, 2021 valuation this fall. They have a pretty good track record over the last few years of getting that report released in July, so we may see that fairly soon. Once we receive it and we have an opportunity to analyze it, we will be back with the City Council with our annual pension review, where we can discuss in a little more detail the status of the plans as well as any corrective action that may be necessary. Changing gears slightly to discuss fund balance, I wanted to briefly discuss one thing that usually goes without a lot of discussion. The budget is typically adopted via a series of 5 resolutions, and one of them is a designation of fund balance. For the most part, this goes without much fanfare. It's usually an endorsement of the status quo, and very rarely is an opportunity to enact policy decisions. However, this year, included with the budget, we've decided to present an option that we think might be prudent for the city to take at this time and submit for your consideration. So this resolution is based on June 30th, 2021 fund balance, which is our last completed audited fiscal year last year. At that time, we had approximately $53 million in total general fund balance or reserves. That's approximately 67% of annual expenditures and reserves. There's been quite a bit of discussion about the use of reserves over the last several months, and it's something we spend a lot of time thinking about and discussing. And one of the dilemmas we have faced is that there seems to be three fairly pronounced opinions about reserves, what they're for, and what maybe we should consider. One of them is reserves are our security, our safety blanket. This is one of the reasons El Cajon is as fiscally strong as it is having that support of the foundation of reserves. And that's an absolutely true statement. There's also been opinions expressed that perhaps it's too much even, which is also a true statement, and that we should look to do something constructive with that excess reserve amount. And we've also heard the opinion expressed that we still have the burden of the pension underfunding, and perhaps we should consider using that money for this purpose. And I think we've done ourselves a disservice by discussing reserves in the total reserve amount of $53 million. And the reason for that is it kind of implies that perhaps these perspectives are incompatible with each other. And I think part of that may be coming from the way that we have chosen to use the reserve categories themselves. And we propose a slightly different designation than what we've done in the past. So we've drafted the resolution with these balances as a concept. The operating reserve, which we typically refer to as the reserve of last resort, and that really kind of represents the bedrock of our reserve status. That is, the very last bucket we will get into. We use it to make sure we have cash on hand for operations. There's a number of reasons. We've largely considered that, basically we'd have to be in a pretty dire situation to be accessing that funding. But the economic uncertainty reserve, we had contributed up to $6.5 million into that bucket several years ago. And after considering it, that really is the safety and security that we're looking for reserves in general. And what we've proposed is perhaps also drawing a target of 20% for that bucket as well. Between the two reserves, that would give us 40% of annual expenditures in reserves to work from. Additionally, we propose an additional contribution, or redesignation of an additional $5 million to our unfunded pension obligation reserve. And that's not any science-based amount. A $5 million contribution on top of the 8 that was already designated was just a nice round number. And that would leave us with the residual amount of the carryover reserve of approximately $8.2 million. And just as a reminder, that really is where we should be looking at any money that is in excess of our goals, our targets, our standards, if you will. It represents additional working capital for additional items that are outside normal operations. It also insulates us from the ebbs and flows of normal operations. But if it were to be used, it's been the recommendation that that's selected for one-time uses. So before we get too far on this topic, I wanted to take this concept and roll it forward for a couple of years so we can get an idea what this may look like if the council is in agreement and adopts this plan. At our last presentation on June 14th, we presented this information. This is the current year anticipated results, the projected results for the year we're in. We're anticipating closing the year with revenues exceeding expenditures by approximately $5 million, which would bring that bottom line number up to $58.1 million. Using this designation strategy, it would look like this. Still, reserves continue to grow by the end of 22 to just shy of 70%. We would maintain 20% in both the operating reserve and the redesignated economic uncertainty reserve and the 13 further unfunded retirement obligations. But at the end of 22, we would see the carryover reserve increase to $11.7 million, or approximately 14% of expenditures on its own. Jumping forward again to the proposed budget year, the budget we're considering for adoption today, next year, we anticipate revenues and expenditures being balanced. These are operating revenues, ongoing revenues and expenses, balanced at $90.1 million. And we have a planned use of reserves of approximately $2.1 million, which would reduce our total fund balance to $56 million and leave us using this designation strategy still with 20% in each of the two reserves, maintain the reserve for unfunded retirement obligations, and begin to use some of that excess reserve in the carryover reserve. But even with these balances projected out, it still leaves approximately 6.7% in the carryover reserve and a total fund balance of approximately 61%. We feel this strategy kind of addresses the variety of goals that have been expressed and helps set a foundation for a sustainable and secure model for many years to come with that. At this point, I'd like to return our focus to the FY23 proposed budget. We'll touch back in with general fund revenues, and to help us with this detail, I'd like to introduce once again Autumn Rehberger, a senior management analyst in the finance department.
Hello, Autumn.
Hi, good afternoon, Mayor and members of the City Council. As Clay mentioned, my name is Autumn Rehberger. I'm the Senior Management Analyst for the Finance Department. I'm going to be going over a few slides with you, presenting additional details for the fiscal 23 budget. The graph that we have here is the general fund revenues for anticipated 23. We're showing that it's $90.1 million. You can see our top three are sales tax Prop J, and property taxes. They account for 76.4% of our total general fund revenues. Sales tax is our largest contributing factor. That includes Prop J, and that gives us 50.2% of our revenues. As you're aware, Prop J is scheduled to sunset in 2029, so that almost $13 million that we have now could potentially go away in a couple of years. This is the same revenue information. It's just presented in a table format. This compares fiscal 22 estimated actuals to the 23 requested budget. You can see there's an overall increase of approximately 2%, 1.7 million increase in 23 over 22 estimated. Our sales tax increase about 2.2%, and property tax we're looking at approximately 7.3% increase. This graph is the fiscal 23 general fund expenditures, which is anticipated to be $92.1 million. You can see salaries and benefits are a majority of the expenses. One thing to note, the pension obligation bonds are actually considered a transfer. So if we look at the $9.1 million in those POB transfers and consider that part of the salaries and benefits, that actually accounts to 77.8% of our general fund expenditures related to salaries and benefits. Again, this is the same general fund expenditure information. It's just separated by department. Police and fire are obviously our largest contributing factors in expenditures, with 71% of the total general fund. But it just shows how committed the city is to providing public safety. So our total general fund is still the $92.1 million. This table is just a comparison of the expenditures from last fiscal year or current fiscal year 22, comparing to the preliminary budget for 23. You can see there is a 10% change from last year to 23. And looking at the general government, that's due in part to some staffing changes. We have an additional position in HR, finance, city clerk's office, and the newly created marketing and engagement manager in the city manager's office. The change in police is due in part to the council-approved overhire of 10 additional police officers using the reserves, as well as a new forensic latent print examiner. And also the Parks and Rec has the use of reserves for the installation of electronic marquees at the rec centers. This is a brief list of performance measures. It's just a sample of a larger presentation that's included in our annual comprehensive financial report. That report comes out the spring of each year, and it is available to review on our website. This just gives a list of some of the services provided by the city. So you can see, like I said, this is just a 3-year history. If you look at the comprehensive financial report, it has a longer historical values in comparison. So you can see things like the police department has arrests 4,208 for 2021. This goes back to 21 because it's our last audited report. Other things you can see are the attendance in recreation classes. We had 117,600 participants in classes in 2021. Fire emergency responses had 15,753. So it's just kind of a snapshot of some of the services we provide. In addition to the general fund, the city also maintains other funding sources. Wastewater is one of those enterprise fund. The revenue budget is $31.8 million. Charges for service are almost the entire revenue for that at 31.7. The expense budget is almost $40 million. And it looks like when you're looking at the overall the expense to the revenue, it looks like there's an excess of expense. However, you need to keep in mind this is a pattern that we typically see because funds are collected in advance of capital projects. So these are some other funds that we have, special revenue funds. We have multiple special revenue funds, but on this slide we've just included the top 5. The American Rescue Plan at $25.8 million, gas tax at $3.6 million, Public Works operating grants at $3 million, the low mod housing at $2.8, and CDBG at $1.3. We also have the debt service fund. There's only one debt service fund for our pension obligation bonds at $9.1 million. And lastly, we have the internal service funds. These are used to track goods and services shifted between departments on a cost reimbursement basis. So some of this is used for vehicle maintenance, vehicle replacement, self-insurance, work comp, information technology, and other post-employment benefits. And with this, I will turn it back over to Clay.
Thank you, Adam.
So moving forward, before we jump into discussing the grants and capital projects, I wanted to touch on a concept that has evolved a little bit with the introduction of our new accounting system. I want to introduce the term multi-year fund to the City Council. This is a concept that should be somewhat familiar. We introduced a few years ago a form of budgeting for projects that we referred to at the time as Project to Life. And the idea there was once the City Council appropriates money for a project, we don't have to come back annually and ask for those appropriations again. It just rolls forward until the project is completed. So it's a once and done type of affair. Now, this was done largely manually in our existing system due to technology limitations. However, the new system does permit us to budget that way in the system itself, which kind of opens up a number of opportunities for us. Using the Tyler terminology, those funds are referred to as multi-year funds. However, they're also commonly referred to as continuing appropriation funds. There's two places that this functionality really lends itself to use, and it is in grant and capital project management. And it just simply makes sense for both of those types of activities that once the City Council considers and adopts appropriations for a specific purpose, we see that purpose out to its conclusion. One of the things unique to this year's budget, as I mentioned earlier, we have a number of resolutions. The actual resolution adopting the city's budget is kind of an interestingly brief affair. There's approximately half a dozen whereases in the resolution itself, but the actual adoption of the budget is a single sentence at the bottom of that page. And this year, we've modified that language very, very slightly, and it was very easy to overlook this. And we wanted to bring this directly to your attention just to make sure it was considered. And we added the language in this year's resolution at the very end of the sentence to reaffirm all active grant and capital project budgets. And what that is doing is that's giving us a little bit of freedom to manage the transition from the old model to the new model. And there's a specific example that this is intended for. On the June 14th agenda, the City Council was asked to consider the adoption and appropriation of the Coverdale grant for the police department. That action, that award and adoption occurred after the budget was drafted, and was not included in the document itself. Wouldn't make sense for us to have to come back and ask the council for permission again to approve it, since we just did it here 2 weeks ago. So that additional language gives us the ability to go ahead and appropriate it, since it was already approved by council, and move it into the new system. So I just didn't want to make that change go without it being brought to your attention. So as the new system applies to grants management, we have a number of improvements in grant administration. One of the significant improvements is the technology allows for far better monitoring. The grant administrators in the departments have much more effective tools to be able to keep an eye on their grants, track expenditures, track billing, things like that. There's also far better reporting capacity in the system for the grants themselves. This is for both external and internal customers. And it also assists in the billing that the grant administrators need to do for the granting agencies. Each department is set up with their own individual grant fund, and within those funds, each grant has its own organizational element, basically a bucket, if you will. And the concept there is when a department brings to the City Council an action once a grant is awarded, they ask for permission to accept, appropriate, and expend this grant. It allows us to set that bucket into action and see it through to its conclusion. Some of the similar benefits in the capital project funds, same kind of improvements for monitoring and reporting. However, this is great relief for staff. A far simpler model for funding CIP projects. We had a very convoluted and manual process of funding CIP projects that required shuffling money around between a number of funds, and it really added unnecessary complexity to the system. And when you have unnecessary complexity, that's an opportunity for people to make mistakes. With the new technology that the Tyler system allows, it's a much more straightforward and simplified funding model, and it allows the system to do the work, and it's far more error-free. So the total CIP program that's included in the FY23 budget has a total project budget of approximately $77.1 million, and that is spread over 49 projects in total, 16 of which are new projects. Of those 16 new projects submitted for approval, this slide presents the top 5. The top 2 here should be familiar. Those are projects that we designated ARPA money for. $3.2 million for the street beautification and safety project. And this is an interesting one because it also brings forward some new technology with the Munis system. This will be set up as a master project, and that is to say it's very vague and very broad at this level. We know there's going to be smaller units within that bigger model, and the technology the system allows is the City Council to appropriate $3.2 million for that general purpose, and then we can come along later and create the subsidiary projects to use this funding. $2.9 million was appropriated or submitted for approval for the Wells Park soccer and pickleball fields. The Overlay 2023 project is a total budget proposed of $1.9 million. $1.8 million at this time for the Oakdale Alameda Gateway project. I don't want to take the wind out of Public Works sales, but I believe they have an item coming up at the next meeting for some grant funding to expand the scope of this project. And the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Program to abate some of the wildfire risk of approximately $1.8 million, $1.7 million. That leaves 11 additional projects, collectively a total project budget of $3.4 million. The proposed budget also includes 9 project budgets in total. This slide presents the top 5 amendments. We propose an additional $2 million for the El Cajon Transit Center project, an expansion of the Broadway Creek Restoration Project Phase B by approximately $1.2 million. Madison safety improvements, $1.1 million, $800,000 amendment for the Main Street, Green Street Gateway Improvement Project, and an additional $300,000 for the Overlay 2020 project. Additionally, there are 4 more amendments that collectively total $90,000. So once we have completed our discussion, we would recommend the following actions by the City Council. The City Attorney would prefer that the City Council adopt the 3 resolutions for the city budgets individually, and then an independent adoption of the 2 resolutions for the Housing Authority as well as the successor agency. So with that, that completes our presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Council? Michelle?
So the topic on social media right now is the Broadway Creek, in my neighborhood, the Broadway Creek Restoration Project. And I see that we've got $1.2 million approximately. Is that city funds that's going towards that? I thought it was all covered by grants.
That is a very complex project. It's split into 2 phases. The first phase does not have any modifications in the proposed budget. If I can pull it off the list here. The Phase A project has a total project budget of $3 million, and it has multiple funding sources that I believe is predominantly grant funded. There is also Phase B that's included here, specifically the $1.2 million amendment that is proposed. Excuse me. My goodness, so many projects. Very last page. The additional $1.2 million for the Broadway Creek Restoration Phase B is specifically $750,000 of Wastewater Enterprise Fund, as well as additional money from the County of San Diego's CDBG allocation.
So we're putting in 1.2 million, then 750,000 from one grant, and then county CDBG funds.
For Phase B, the total proposed amended budget is just shy of $3 million. It's about 50-50 between wastewater enterprise fund money and then CDBG, that is both city CDBG and county CDBG. Most of the grant funding is tied up in project, the Phase A of the project.
Okay, thank you very much.
To add to that, there's a little bit of developer impact fee money as well. The developers contributing to some of the project, and there is no general fund money involved with this project.
Okay, because there was some confusion as to why it took so long for the project to start, and it was my understanding that it was because we were waiting for all the grants to come in and all the money to come in before we started. I also was under the impression that it was all grant money, the entire project, and not taxpayer money. So if I'm understanding this correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, the 1.2 million is coming out of...
I wouldn't call that taxpayer money. I'd call that ratepayer money. And there is a distinction between the two.
Ratepayer, thank you.
The increase of, I'd like to talk about reserves. Going back to one of your very first slide, I think you said a couple of years ago the unfunded liability was $207 million, and it's since grown to $225 million. Is the $13 million that you're suggesting that we carry allocated in our reserves to cover increases like that? Or the impact of increases like that?
I would say at some point in time, yes. I think there's a very important strategy discussion to be had before we commit to specifically what we use that money for, the $13 million for. We can use it as an additional contribution to the plan. We can use it to offset rates, or we can hang on to it as a rate stabilization fund. Excuse me.
Your formula has 20%, 20%, 13 million, and what's left over. On the 92 million, that's kind of inflated this year because we had an extra $1.5 million used from reserves for the 10 extra police officers, which we know is not going to be an ongoing expense, that we should get it back at some point. And I believe about $500,000 for digital signs at the recreation center. So I'd almost look at the 20% on the 90 million rather than the 92 million, because 92 is inflated by 2 million because we're pulling it out of reserves. Follow me?
Yeah, and it'll inflate from year to year, right? And ideally, as the beauty of the formula is that your reserves grow automatically as a percentage because your general fund expenditures will typically grow from year to year. But you're right, this is a bit of an anomaly year. Because of the use of the general fund reserves.
Yeah, so the impact is about $800,000, and I think I can live with that. Next year, the general fund budget might be $92 million, and then there's our $800,000 increase right there.
That is a strategy we've used in the past where we base that calculation on the operating budget as opposed to the total budget. Either is completely acceptable depending on the circumstances. The designation using that balance would be the adoption of the FY25 budget, and it would be something to consider 2 years from now.
I think the public would also like to know what's the difference between a reserve for the 20% of your balance expenditures and 20% for economic uncertainty. I can see some people saying that seems duplicate. Why do you have two different buckets for that?
I think it's more of a designation of the severity of need or how significant its use is. I would think that using the 20% for economic uncertainty is something that would not be a red flag, flashing light sort of situation. You know, if we had another event like maybe not as severe as 2008, 9, 10, but something like that, we could see a situation where we would use those reserves to continue our services. And that should not alarm us. That's exactly what it was for. But by segregating the operating reserve, that absolutely is a red flag, flashing light situation. It is, by its definition, the reserve of last resort, and it would require rather dire action.
Okay.
If I can jump in there too, I think, and Mr. Shane's talked about this before, that some, and I think Mr. Kendrick asked the question last meeting, what's the right amount to have? And we've talked about this before. It all depends on the city, right? If your city's on a fault line or is susceptible to flooding every single year, you probably want a little bit more. Our city is susceptible to economic downturn pretty quickly. The majority of our general fund revenue comes from sales tax revenue. A city like Encinitas, for example, where the majority comes from property tax, there's a little bit more stability with that. There's less fluctuation. So we have automatically more fluctuation. The other challenge that we have is a large percent of our sales tax is tied up with auto sales and construction industry, which we know are the two industries hit hardest during a recession. So having that perhaps duplicative amount, I think the way I can justify it to the city council is we are a little bit more susceptible than some cities if we were to have a recession. And so having that extra cushion will help us weather that storm.
Okay, a couple more topics. Thank you. The Magnolia Center, there's a Magnolia Performing Arts Center fund, and there was just one statement that said operating expenditures are budgeted at $1.1 million. So I know the public is keenly aware of how's the Magnolia doing. And I think from the city manager, he said, well, even in this partial year from last July to this year, we still achieved $600,000 in income. So the subsidy from the general fund or from that fund was about $500,000. So I feel good that we're not like sinking a ton of money into the Magnolia, that we may actually break even next year, this coming fiscal year, with a full fiscal year and full openings. So that's one that I'm watching because I know the public is watching. The El Cajon Transit Center, you have $2 million there. Is that to coordinate with MTS's third rail track project?
I'm not certain I have the answer to that
Okay,
in front of me, so
I'll
I might look for help.
I don't
on
think
that
it has to do with the third rail. I think it has to do with the development of that area. So we have some funding available, or there's some public improvements that we're doing in that area generally, some transit improvements. I don't know if it reflects in this budget, but we have set aside some housing money to help facilitate a project on the an affordable housing project on the parking lot site at MTS.
Okay, so it'd be gap funding.
Correct.
Funds. Okay. For the public, this year the El Cajon Transit Center will get a third track because no longer will, I think it's the orange line, perhaps the green line, a 3-car train go out to Santee. It'll be what's called a shuttle, which is a 1-car train, which has two cars in one train. And the reason is MTS is saying there's just not the traffic that justifies going all the way from El Cajon out to Santee. So what they're going to do is add a third track that can kind of make it a turnaround, so to speak, when you get down to El Cajon and turn around and go back to La Mesa, et cetera. So that's a significant change for ridership, and that's happening this fiscal year. MTS has already approved that project. Finally, if we could go back to the performance measures slide, there's some interesting stories there that I think the public would be interested in. That one. I know it's kind of hard to see. And this 2021 really is from July of 2020, which was shut down, through June of 2021, which it was finally lifted on June 15th. So the 2021 column really is the brunt of the shutdown time period. And we see things like police, the arrests went down, traffic violations went down, parking violations went down. That could be a function of just people traveling less, not going to work as much. The Parks and Recreation, the classes went from 811 to 3,487, and attendance jumped, and I think that was the dollar days impact, which really got people out of their houses during a pandemic, which was nice to see. One concerning thing that I'm keeping my eye on, though, is the fire. And the number of emergency responses went from 15.8 to 14.9 to 15.7 actually increased during the shutdown, and the fires extinguished went from 360 to 496. So I know we're adding positions to PD, city clerk, finance, public works, HR, parks and rec, the city manager department. I'm keeping an eye on the fire department because we have some guys up in Riverside right now that they're not available to us. They're on a strike team ready. I'm just concerned about we've got more people in the city. We've got new housing in the city. I'm just concerned about the wear and tear on the staff and on the equipment. I know we have a nurse triage thing coming up. I don't know when that's going to start or if that's in the budget for this year that we're talking about. That certainly should help reduce calls. I'll give you an example. There is a group residential home 2 streets over for me, and I frequently hear the sirens come. And I found out in the past year there's been 20 calls to that house. And that's just, I think the public would say, why are we showing up to a house 20 times in a year? And it kind of fell under the radar of licensing. And these are the kind of things that we need to take a look at. What are we taking care of our fire department without compromising service? So that particular, looking at the emergency responses go up in a pandemic year when people were home. Maybe they needed, because they were home, they had more home incidents. I'm not sure, but that's the only department that didn't seem to really get a bump, and I think we're getting close to needing one. Out in East El Cajon with Station 8, we've talked about the amount of mutual aid. Perhaps 3 to 4 calls come in for every 1 call that we do. So I'm kind of on a short leash with the fire response. I think we owe that to our citizens before we owe them other things. And that's on my watch list. That is all the comments that I have on the budget. Very well done and comprehensive.
Thank you, Steve. Gary?
Well, first of all, I want to thank the staff for such a great budget. It really makes a lot of sense. And I do want to address the 20% we have for economic uncertainty. For one thing, a lot of people think that we may be going into a recession, hopefully not stagflation, because the feds are raising the interest rate. We have inflation out now, 8% now year over year, and the Fed's job is to protect the dollar, and they're going to slow down the economy to keep the inflation rate down to their goal of 2%, and that may become very painful. And as the city manager pointed out, we depend upon car sales for a big part of our budget, and car sales are usually the first thing to go, and construction. And right now, construction is down because interest rates are up. Real estate values are pretty shaky, have dipped a little bit lately. So we could take a hit on sales tax revenue, and I sleep better at night knowing that we have that 20% set aside for economic uncertainty. The last thing I want to do is have to lay off police and fire because we don't have the money to pay them because we didn't put out that 20% that gets us through bad times. So I think that's very prudent. And I like to, if I'm going to err, I'm going to err on the side of being prudent and not having to cut back services to our citizens. So all in all, I think this budget is a good one. It's strong. And we're going to make sure that we keep our citizens safe because our number one priority is public safety. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Clay, for the report. It seems like that accounting software that we adopted is saving a lot of staff time and making it completely easy not completely easy, but much easier to navigate our finances.
Mr. Ortiz, if you knew the pain that they're going through just to get, it will eventually be, you're right, but it is painful.
Yeah.
I'm scared to go on the 5th floor sometimes.
Yeah. whose idea was that? It seems like Tyler Technologies were adapting a lot of their technologies to the city. It seems like they have some very good applications for the city. So whoever's idea that was, job well done to save that time and save Clay's sanity. Regarding the budget, thank you, Clay. I appreciate that we have a relatively balanced budget. And I want to note that the majority of the increase that I see, and I think we've discussed this before, in our reserve funds are not because we're raising taxes on our citizens. It's because our staff are finding ways to create efficiencies within the nature of government. And that's where our savings is coming from. So we're not increasing fees to the public either. They're nominal. Well, we are, but nominally to keep up with just the cost of doing business. So from a philosophical standpoint, I think that's the best form of government is we're not raising taxes, we're finding efficiencies in government to increase our funding. And with regard to the reserve balance, I'm completely okay with having this amount of reserves, 20% and 20%. I don't know if Clay or our city manager wants to answer this, but with regard to the 20% metric, that's a national standard, or how does that 20% come? I know we've had this conversation before, if you can reiterate it.
GFOA's best practice is 2 months of revenues or expenses as a starting point for the discussion. That's approximately 16.67%. Frankly, not a very friendly number. I think most people would like to round it up to something that's easy to administer, and I think choosing 20 over 17 is right. Simply that.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And starting, I think that's the baseline. And as our city manager said, and I'd point out, there's a lot of liabilities with regard to our city and the potential downturn in sales tax revenue with regard to car sales in a recession. Prop J expiration in 6 years now, I think, 7 years, where that's a large part of our sales tax revenue. Most cities don't have the high pension obligations that we have. And so I think the need for a reserve, a larger reserve, is needed to kind of dig ourselves out of the hole and hedge against an economic downturn where we're fulfilling our obligations. So those are my comments. I appreciate everything that the finance department has done in the city manager's office to create this budget for the city. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I didn't get to thank you for your great budget like everybody else did. But I do have a question. Steve brought up something that made me think. In my area of town, in Molliston, Bradley area, San Miguel Fire is the one that responds most to that area. How do they get paid? Do they get paid out of our fire budget? Or who supports them?
Most of our neighboring agencies have a mutual aid agreement that is basically we help them, they help us, and there's not any money associated with that typically.
Okay. I was just kind of curious because I live right around the corner from the station, and very rarely do we have a day where there's no fire truck going off all day long. Otherwise, it's, a constant flow of they're out all day. So I just wanted to find out how that gets paid. Thank you.
I'd like to make one quick comment. I really appreciate the praise on the quality of this product, but realistically, there's a very large number in every department in the city that works on this document. This is one of the few activities that has every department working on the same thing at the same time. So I appreciate the thanks, but it really is a citywide effort.
Any more questions or comments? Well, please thank the staff for us as well.
Mr. Mayor, we do have a public comment.
Great.
The speaker is Malik Thornton.
Hello, Mr. Thornton, welcome.
Hello, thank you. My name is Malik Thornton. I am a longtime resident of El Cajon. I go to school here. I have family here. I'm here because I care about my city, I care about my community, and I care about the people that live here. I'm here to speak about the budget because, as you know, the budget is one of the most important things that a municipality can place on their agenda. So it was kind of interesting to me that the city only allowed for 2 opportunities for the public to come and have their voices heard. We want our voices heard on the millions of tax dollars that are being spent on this budget. And I'm asking that the city take steps to expand the length of budget approval process so that more working families that don't have the luxury to take off time can come and have their voices heard. Another thing that I would like to speak on this budget is homelessness. Our city has continued to struggle with this problem. It's an issue that we still struggle with. And according to the point-in-time count, El Cajon has the 3rd highest number of unhoused individuals. That's 12 more than cities in the county and 5 unincorporated areas. That's ridiculous. We need to take steps to make sure that our brothers and sisters that are on the street have the resources that they need. Members of this council and staff have continued to say that we're doing enough. And to quote one of the members on this council, we cannot be the only ones doing something. Well, I would argue that we're not doing enough. And frankly, the data shows that we're not doing enough. Every year, we give money to great nonprofits that really do great work. They make sure that they get people off the streets temporarily, but it's not enough because we still have more unhoused individuals on our streets. So I hope that the council hears my concerns because they're not just my concerns, they're my community's concerns and they're my community's feelings as well. So I hope that you guys take the steps to address these because the only other option is new leadership within the Valley of Opportunities. So thank you.
Thank you. Any more speakers?
No more speakers, sir.
Okay. So we need to make a motion. I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
All right, council, I'll bring it back to you for discussion. Remember, we need motions on all 3 items when we get to that point. Any discussion, or somebody like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution of the City of El Cajon adopting the fiscal year 2022-23 annual budget, the resolution approving and adopting the annual appropriations limit for fiscal year 22-23, and the resolution approving designation of general fund balances.
Second.
Before we do that, I think that we need to do them individually. Is that correct? Yeah. So, Phil, if you could just give us the first one.
Yeah. So I'll make a motion, strike that, move to adopt the resolution of the City of El Cajon adopting the fiscal year 22-23 annual budget.
Second.
Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
Move to adopt the resolution approving and adopting the annual appropriations limit for fiscal year 22-23.
Second.
Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
And I'll move to adopt the resolution approving the designation of general fund balances.
Second.
Please vote.
Councilmember Mitchell, we need your vote, please. Motion carries by unanimous vote.
And acting as the Housing Authority Board of Directors, move to adopt resolution titled Resolution of the El Cajon Housing Authority adopting the fiscal year 22-23 budget.
Second.
Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
And acting as the successor agency to the former Redevelopment Agency Board of Directors, move to adopt a resolution titled Resolution of the City Council of the City of El Cajon as the successor agency to the former El Cajon Redevelopment Agency, adopting the fiscal year 22-23 budget.
Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to take a very short 3 to 5 minute break, and then we'll be back to continue with the rest of the meeting. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Look at that wax taste. We're talking about whether Mother's cookies are good cookies or not. I think they're too waxy, but
For a while those were only sold in California, and my mom would have me ship them back east.
no kidding.
Yeah.
Little trivia. All right, we're back, and we are on to the next item, which the next item is in regard to the salaries of council members and the mayor and the adjustment of the cafeteria benefit allotment for the same. And I'll ask our city manager to please tell us about this.
Mr. Mayor, I think we have item 6, the Veterans Memorial update
Did we
first.
not get that? Let's do that first. Oh, there it is, yeah. Okay. We have 3 administrative reports on today's agenda. Item 6 is an update on the Veterans Memorial, and I'll ask staff to tell us about this.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Frank Carson, the Parks and Recreation Director. I'm just up here to give you a brief update on our Veterans Memorial project and where we've been and where we're going. So just as a review, in November 11 in 2000, on Veterans Day, the city and the American Legion Post 303 based here in El Cajon installed what you know as the Veterans Memorial just outside these doors right now. And then I didn't add on here, but June 14, 2014 is when they installed the larger flagpole with the POW MIA flag underneath it with the lights shooting up toward it. Our January 11, 22 council meeting, there, after careful requests by our city council to look at potential new locations to offer more to our veteran community in different ways to memorialize their service to our community as well as their dependents and family members. City staff proposed potential 2 locations, just as a starter to get the conversations going. We looked at the Prescott Promenade as well as the plaza area in front of the Public Safety Building, which you know as the Police Department building. And I put Rob Tate up there. He's the former post commander of American Legion Post 303, if you're wondering why. I'll tell you why in just a second. But the city, along with city staff, led by Adam Toronto, our Parks and Recreation Manager, created the newly formed Veterans Coalition. We were intending to start that in January of this year, but if you remember in January we had an uptick in COVID cases, so we did a brief pause with that, only to wait because we wanted to meet in person. That was the big thing, is start meeting in person about that. We were able to get that going and have our first meeting in May of this year. And at that time, staff presented before the Veterans Coalition at least the idea of a new Veterans Memorial. And we had 4 of the 6 Veterans Coalition members come, and we had more ideas. So it was a time for staff to take a step back and recalibrate and go, okay, what more do we need to do within our community? On June 16, the Veterans Coalition members met with city staff to look at potential sites that were discussed at council also, and also offer their feedback to us. The reason why I bring in the American Legion Post 303 is not only because they were instrumental in getting that Veteran Memorial out there, but they were also instrumental, and this is a picture from the Bostonia Playground Project, Kaboom, in November of 2013. They were one of our granting agencies, meaning Kaboom needed a veteran 501c19 to partner with us to get that playground at Bostonia. So they were kind enough to do that. So we do have a long-standing strong relationship with the American Legion Post 303, going back many, many years. One thing that we learned from, especially Memorial Day and having informal discussions with American Legion Post 303 is, should we add Space Force as part of it, being that is the 6th now part of the Department of Defense. So that's something that we want to pull out from our community members. Is that something that we should add in to this? And then one thing that we started coming from just informal and formal discussions within our stakeholders were, should the priority be a gathering place location, or should it be more publicly visible? I know you may be able to have two or both those options as one, but what should be the primary? In discussions with the Veterans Coalition members, and I appreciate them wanting to shoot for the stars, but some of it may be that this is great to see from the street, but it may not be the best gathering place. So we also want to honor our American Legion Post 303 members that do meet at the Veteran Memorial still, with hundreds of people at different times from Memorial Day, but also Veterans Day, and other public gatherings that they have there. So we want, what should our priority be? And we want to get all stakeholders' input. Having said that, we have further presentations at our Veterans Memorial Hall, located at 136 North Chambers, just a few blocks from here. And those groups are the Marine Corps League Detachment. I should have actually put Marine Corps League, just didn't have full room there, so I put Marine League. Fleet Reserve Association, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, or VFW, and AMVETS, also known as American Veterans. And separately, the American Legion Post 303, they meet at the school district offices right now once a month. But we do have a member on our Veterans Coalition named Jack Kane, and he is a member also of the American Legion Post 303. And he also has expressed, there is varying opinions within the American Legion Post 303. So we have a lot more to be heard, a lot more people to be heard. And that's the most important thing, I think, in this process, to make sure everybody's heard and given their feedback, so they can't come back to us later saying, I was never talked to about this. And that's one thing that we've definitely gathered, at least from the first phase of getting stakeholder input. I did put in there also that we plan on hosting at least 2 community meetings at community centers this summer. And we'll do that when we definitely have a captive audience at the community center, such as a Saturday morning when we have gymnastics programs and we have at least 50 parents there already. But we want to open that up to dependents, family members, and veterans that may not be a part of the 501c19s, because we estimate we have about 7,000 veterans in the city, and less than 10% of those are members of 501c19s. So there's a larger veteran community out there that we want to hear from as well. At this time, I will be happy to take any feedback as we move into summer and host more community meetings. We'll definitely make council aware when we do host those community meetings, should you want to attend those as well.
Thank you, Frank, for the presentation, and really for all the work that you and your team are doing, being the liaison between our veterans groups and the city. I think we're doing absolutely the best thing possible with regard to soliciting as much feedback from all of these veterans groups. If we exclude them from the process when they're the ones we're making it for, then that's really not that nice of a gesture. If we're the ones that we're trying to honor those exact people. So thank you very much. Keep doing what you're doing, and please, let us know when those meetings are. I would personally like to attend and hear straight from the horse's mouth, what the feedback is. So thank you.
Michelle?
Hi, thanks, Frank, for a good report. Question: How do you plan on contacting the 7,000 vets that we have in town?
A basic way of marketing is trying to hit people in 7 different ways. So we do have the capacity of contacting about 20,000 of the 34 or 35,000 households within our own registration software that we use for registration programs. So email would be one. That's a very basic concept. Text message, we have about 5,000 people within our own database that we can text, and we use that very conservatively so we don't get people saying, I don't want to get text from you anymore. Various strategies through social media as well as news releases, and also try to reach out to the veteran community to help spread the word in that way, in different ways. So get them flyers so they can distribute to people that maybe don't want to be a part of an organization but still want to have their voice heard.
Okay.
But the target will be at least 7 different strategies to market it out there.
All right. Well, just let me know how I can spread the word.
Absolutely.
Send out my social media post.
Yes,
Thank you.
More thoughts? From my point of view, I think we should definitely include the Space Force.
Okay. Thank you for the feedback, sir.
And does anybody feel differently than that?
It's just so new, we want to make sure we hear that expressed. The
Yeah.
staff doesn't want to make that decision, basically.
I understand, yeah. And other than that, it seems like you're on the right track. You'll come back and give us regular updates. And how are we doing on fundraising, and what are the plans for that?
I think that's the next component once we get a better idea of what scale we're looking at, and then the fundraising can start to kick in.
So you come back with a number next time?
Or the next time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. All right. Well, thanks, Frank. Appreciate that. If there's no more questions? All right, any speaker cards on this item? Thank you, Frank.
No, sir, no cards.
All right, I don't think we need to make a motion, just receive the report and give feedback, which we have done. All right. Now on to the salaries of council members and the mayor and the adjustment of the cafeteria benefit allotment for the same. Graham?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Get my PowerPoint up really quickly. For this agenda item, staff is presenting 2 items for City Council consideration related to its compensation and the benefit package it receives. And that is if that's it. There we go. Okay. For some background information, the council last updated its or last modified its salary that went into effect on January 1st, 2021. It's interesting to note or important to note that previous to that, the last time there had been an adjustment to the mayor or council salary was in 2005. So it had been many years that the council went without any salary adjustments. It's also important to note that there's 2 provisions in government code that really regulate how the council can decide on how to compensate itself. One, there's a maximum of 5% per year since the last raise was received. So there's that maximum ceiling amount. And the other thing is the new rate cannot become effective until after the next election. So in our case, it would be the January 1st, 2023. And then lastly, it's important to note that the last time that the council received an update in its cafeteria benefits was about 3 years ago when it went, I can't remember what it was before, but it's $1,200 a month right now. So even though it's not really the same as a city staff position, we did want to look at kind of a salary comparison just to see if we're an outlier. As you can see for the mayor's position, in comparing 8 comparison cities, larger cities also that operate, some of them that operate police departments, we fall about in the middle for the mayor's salary. And for council, about the same. We're about in the mid-range for council member salaries as well. Staff recommends, based on our analysis, that the council consider an ordinance that would increase its salary by 10%, which would be the maximum allowed amount. This would result in an increase of $288 for the mayor per month and $198 for council members. And this again would put you, would not, going back to this chart, would move most of you up 1 bar or 2 bars, but it would not put you near the very top of the council or mayor pay in the county. The other thing that we're recommending is that the council consider a resolution that would also effective January 1st, 2023, would be to increase your cafeteria amount to match that of what staff will be receiving on January 1st, 2023, which is $1,350. So with that, staff's here to answer any questions that you may have, but there are 2 things before you. Again, the first reading of the ordinance and the resolution if you wish to consider these items.
All right, thanks, Graham. Any questions, Graham? All right, are there any speaker cards on this item?
No cards, sir.
Okay, it's up to you guys.
Yeah, I'll make a motion. Introducing the ordinance amending Chapter 2.16.020 of the El Cajon Municipal Code related to salaries of council members and mayor, and direct city clerk to read the title of the ordinance. And does it have to be individual? Does it have to be individual motions? Yes?
In this case, yes.
Okay, that's my motion.
I've got a comment.
Oh.
And I'll probably do a substitute motion, which is okay. 10% would be 5% for each of the past 2 years, correct?
That's correct.
So I don't feel we should take more than what staff got, which I think was 2.5% for each of the past 2 years. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I don't think we should take more than what staff got. I don't think that is a team team move. So I guess I would make a substitute motion to make that a 5% increase, 2.5 for 1 year and 2.5 for another year, and keep the cafeteria allowance as presented. That would be a substitute motion.
Any second or more discussion? All right, any more discussion? We have a motion and a second on the table. Please vote.
Can we clarify the motion? Is it my motion or is
If the substitute motion always first.
I have a comment then.
Can we reset the voting then, please?
The council went for something like 15 years with no raise whatsoever, and at the time became way below and what was average. And I think that if we don't keep up at market, you're going to have a harder time getting qualified people unless they're retired or independently wealthy that can take a whole day off and do all the other things. So I think what the most important thing is that the council stay within the pack and what it's I'm a big believer in paying market wages, whether it's staff or for anyone to get good people.
Okay, so there is a motion and a second on the table, and just to clarify, the motion is to have the salary increase be 5% as opposed to the 10% that the staff has recommended. Am I correct? All right, so motion and second. Yes, Phil.
really quickly, the difference is a couple $100 or maybe $100. I don't know that it's a fair representation to say 2.5% versus 5% each with regard to paying compensation. I think the actual dollar amount is negligible in that respect. And to bring up another point, this is voting. We're essentially voting for whoever sits in this seat to have this pay, because the law says that the raises don't go into effect until after the election. So I've sat in this seat, and I know that if you're going to be a good council member, it's going to take a lot of time and effort. And that's my opinion. Whether I get elected or not is outside of this, because it's for the person that's going to get elected to sit in this seat. So something to consider. That's my perspective.
So just to clarify, if this motion passes, we don't go back to your motion, but if this motion fails, then we go back to your motion and see if there's a second.
Got it. Okay.
Another comment?
Sure.
So as you can see, the 288, 198 would be cut in half. That's you're talking about. It would be 144 for the mayor and 99 for the council per month. Philosophically, I think I have a hard time saying to the public, we're giving ourselves a 5% raise when many people in the public did not get a 5% raise in the past year, even though inflation's 8%, far outpaces that. That's why I'm saying 2.5 is perhaps more. We're feeling the pain with everybody. If you want to say we're in this together with at 2.5%. The three of us, this will affect us because we're not up for election for another 3 years or so. This would affect whoever sits in these two seats. Yep. So I am voting on our raises in a sense. I think the public would appreciate our posture at 2.5% because to the public, every dollar counts. And I don't feel good taking 5% when I think some people in the public didn't get 5%.
So as Graham tells the Police Citizens Academy, we're basically volunteers. And yes, I understand that if somebody was depending on this position as their only income, it would be really tough. But we're not full-time city council members like San Diego. Some may put in 40, 50 hours a week. Some may only put in 10 or 15 hours a week. It doesn't matter. I think that as public servants, we have to be mindful of what we are giving ourselves. I agree with Steve. I think that we should keep it at what staff got. And yes, I am retired, but that's not what I got into this position for. I did not come into this position for the money. I didn't even know we were going to get paid until after I filed my paperwork. So it's not like I came into here to get paid, but I served my community, and getting the 2.5% is a bonus. Having the insurance is a bonus. It helps, but I only plan to be here 2 terms. I don't plan on making this a lifetime position. I know you have to run every 4 years, but this is not a lifetime position. So I agree with Steve that it's not something that I can vote for the full 5.
Okay, there's a motion on the table in a second. If everybody's ready, please vote.
Motion fails by a 3-2 vote with Mayor Wells, Councilmember Member Kendrick, and Councilmember Ortiz voting no.
All right, now it goes back to Phil's motion. He doesn't have a second. Would somebody be willing to second?
Second.
All right, any more discussion? All right, please vote.
Motion carries by a 3-2 vote with Councilmember Goebel and Councilmember Metschel voting no.
All right. We have to introduce an ordinance next. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The title is an ordinance repealing section 2.16.020 of chapter 2.16 and adding a new section 2.16.020 of chapter 2.16 of the El Cajon Municipal Code, adjusting salaries of council members and mayor effective January 1, 2023.
All right. I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution as recommended.
I need a second to look at that.
I have a comment. Would it?
What's that? Are we doing this correctly? Or
Yeah, so the next item would be considering the resolution before you as well.
And the resolution is to codify what was just approved by vote?
The resolution is to increase the cafeteria benefit from $1,200 a month to $1,350 a month starting January 1st.
This is cafeteria only?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You don't need any kind of a vote on the ordinance that was just read.
You voted on that already, so we're...
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, we're just a little confused here. We'll figure it out. All right. Michelle, you had...
So what did staff get this last time? Their increases, didn't they get $50 increase?
So it's due to increase... So the council hasn't had an increase in cafeteria for 3 years. So the council approved increases to $13,500 or $1,350 starting January 1st. So we're recommending that the council match what staff will be receiving starting in January.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any sense of how much costs have gone up in regard to insurance? And
I'm looking to our HR director. I can't remember how much the Kaiser plan went. So there's 12 plans. It does vary. For several years, it stayed about the same, but it has increased the last few years.
yeah.
You have to come up, Ms. Thorne.
Hi, Marisol.
Hi, Marisol, HR Director. Some of the plans may be going up to 12%. So depending on which plan you're enrolled in, there will be a significant increase, and that's attributed to COVID.
Okay, so it looks like it's about 10% increase, a little over by 12% increase.
That's correct, and the council has not given itself incremental increases over the last 3 years.
So we're looking at about 12% increase in costs and a 12% increase in pay. All right. Any questions for Marisol? Thanks, Marisol. Okay. Any speaker cards on this part of it?
No speaker cards.
Okay. All right. So now it's up to the council.
Mayor Wells, I believe you've made the first motion.
Yes, actually, you're right. I did. So
Second.
all right. Move in second, and please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
All right. The last administrative report, item 8, is the El Cajon Economic Development Strategic Plan. And I'll ask staff to tell us about this.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and City Council. This item is the proposed El Cajon Economic Development Strategic Plan. Staff will provide responses to the feedback and direction received at the March 22nd council meeting and answer any questions the council may have. Furthermore, the city's consultant, Roger Dale of Nadelson Dale Group, is here to assist us as he made the presentation, primarily the main portion of the presentation on March 22nd. At that meeting, the City Council received a presentation with a lot of information, including demographic data and 9 proposed strategies designed to meet 3 goals. And those 3 goals are to expand economic opportunities for El Cajon residents, revitalize commercial and industrial areas by encouraging private investment that responds to anticipated real estate market demand, and strengthen the city's fiscal position by attracting land uses and businesses that have the potential to generate general fund revenue. So we want to go over the feedback given to the staff by the City Council in a brief fashion and expand if needed. Now, the City Council asked, how can efforts be made towards residential renewal and reinvestment? Could that fit into the plan? You know, traditionally, economic development focuses on sustaining and increasing city's tax base, primarily sales tax. Investments, opportunities for public and private partnerships, increasing job creation within certain sectors, and maximizing sustainable economic growth and viability. Residential investments are typically short-term benefits because the construction activity is temporary and it's not sustaining. Moreover, material and labor are likely imported from outside the city with no direct economic benefit to the city. We think the city's efforts should be in those other areas under an economic development strategic plan. However, the City Council has had a lot of success with the apartment inspection program, which has resulted in a lot of reinvestment in the existing housing stock. The city also has single-family rehab and mobile home rehab programs for those households who qualify for such programs. And the city's development team does a very good job in terms of attracting new investment and new residential development in the city. And the city has the benefit of not having development impact fees to attract that investment. For business attraction, one of the proposed strategies includes business attraction. That's its main focus. In fact, proposed strategy number 1 is designed to attract, retain, and expand businesses that are locally strong and those that are dominant in the region, San Diego County, but are not necessarily representative here in El Cajon. Another question posed by the council related to infrastructure impacts and property assemblage. As the council knows, El Cajon has a strong and reliable infrastructure. It's designed to accommodate existing as well as future development. As is currently, significant new development investments are analyzed by the city's development teams to ensure any identified impacts are addressed, which are typically borne by the developer. And property assemblage is a result of a sizable redevelopment where a developer has purchased more than one property and combines them to support a specific type of development, one that the city may be interested in or part of the economic development strategic plan. So infrastructure needs and property assemblage may be two areas that could be part of a city-funded initiative or incentive program in a scalable fashion. Another feedback or idea had to do with upscale housing. Currently, residential development incentives exist in the transit district specific plan area and the mixed-use overlay zone. However, they do not address interior fixtures such as appliances and other items within the unit. If directed, staff can certainly look into this idea as part of the upcoming zoning code omnibus update, which the staff does almost annually. The other item that was brought up at the last council meeting was a CEQA streamlining. The city has approximately 600 acres of CEQA-cleared project areas that encompass the transit district, the downtown, Fletcher Parkway, commercial corridor, primarily up in the Fletcher Hills area, East Main Street corridor over there by where the Kaiser Hospital site was slated, and Parkway Plaza. And since 2017, these areas have been identified for prime reinvestment of new commercial and residential development while protecting existing established neighborhoods. Future development outside these areas would require an environmental assessment to determine if there's a need for an in-depth CEQA analysis. But the council should know is that the staff routinely uses the CEQA exemptions for new development, and something that we use quite frequently. Parkway Plaza has been brought up quite a bit, not just at the March 22nd City Council meeting, but at other times. This prime shopping center is about 80 acres and has historically been an economic driver, not just for the city of El Cajon, but also for East County. In 2017, the City Council adopted the mixed-use overlay zone, which it applied to the Parkway Plaza site. Now, this zone is intended to invigorate properties by creating new activity centers and injecting new life with new housing opportunities. As of now, only Seritage, formerly the Sears Holdings, has been actively repurposing their asset out there at Parkway Plaza. However, staff, city manager's office primarily, as well as community development, will continue to work with Parkway Plaza ownership and the other properties that are out there, other property owners that are out there. Before making a recommendation, however, Vince DiMaggio would like to speak a little bit about how the city would implement the strategic plan, economic development plan, if adopted by the City Council.
And before I speak to the implementation, I know that City Manager Graham Mitchell would like to say a couple of things about the housing aspect of this.
So I was thinking that I think it's important that the council recognize that the economic development strategic plan is not an isolated document. It fits in with a bigger plan. We spend CDBG dollars, for example, to improve lower income neighborhoods. We have redevelopment plans around the transit district and the downtown area with the goal of infusing housing. We've learned that typically retail and restaurants aren't driven by slick brochures or marketing. They're really driven by the number of people that live within a certain area. And I see on Facebook all the time, why can't the city get this business, right? Or why don't they put this business here? Well, they is driven by the number of people that live in that area. And so it's the reason why it's important that we consider some development in the downtown. We have no grocery stores in this area. Well, there shouldn't be, because there's no people that live in this area, right? You infuse more people in the downtown area, that will prompt that grocery store development. So this plan doesn't really address that. I think other redevelopment plans will address those components of economic development. And then just having a really strong downtown business association that draws people in will also drive more retail and restaurant attraction to a certain area. So I think it's important that the council has that sort of that larger context of how this plan fits in with the bigger scheme of the city's efforts.
And so, Mayor and Council, I just want to briefly give you an idea about what next steps are. If you were to adopt this is, as you know, a policy document. Okay, so this is the 30,000-foot view of what we then need to take away throughout this process that involved, as you know, committees, multiple ways to engage the community in various ways through the committee process, using our consultant. And so we've reached the point of you considering adopting the policy document. If that occurs, what we then go into is implementation mode. And we would look to Roger Dale of Nadelson Dale to continue on with us, working with primarily Tony and myself, to come up with an implementation plan. The implementation plan is primarily but not exclusively a staff-level document. And why do I say that? Because there will be issues that are part and parcel of the implementation of this policy document that will need to come before you, specifically any sort of staffing increases, like a dedicated economic development manager. That's a new staff position that would have to be proposed to you as part of implementing the larger policy. Another thing could be any sort of zoning changes that are recommended to implement the attraction of businesses or implement any of the 9 strategies or several of the 9 strategies in the strategic plan. Another would be, very important, appropriations. These could be appropriations for implementation measures involving public and private partnerships. These could be appropriations of various investments, development agreements that call for something on the city's part as well as the developer's part, the type of funding that you want to use. Obviously, we approach you with the idea that we have ARPA money to spend and a time limit in which to spend it. So primarily, we're going to be looking at spending that ARPA money on the implementation phase. However, there's been considerable discussion about how you want to use reserves available to you long term, long after the expiration of the ARPA monies and long after the ARPA monies have been spent in this effort. You may want to continue on with a multi-year effort funding from a different source. So these are all of the things that we still have to do in great detail for the implementation plan. And when that plan is done, we'll be back before you talking about what we think needs to happen as far as the plan is concerned, and then come back to you multiple times as different things need to take effect to have the implementation plan actually be implemented, if you will. So with that, on the implementation side, I'll be happy to answer any questions. As was said, Roger Dale is here to answer any questions, and as well as Tony.
Any questions for staff? Michelle.
Can you explain to me what upscale housing means?
Well, Mayor and City Council, this was brought up at the last council, or March 22nd council meeting by Councilmember Gary Kendrick. The idea, as we understand it, was to attract high-income households to the city of El Cajon through a higher price point of housing, which would be a result of the type of amenities that that housing had, such as the type of appliances, the type of fixtures, the type of materials used to construct the housing.
I think the issue here with this is the idea of housing, as the city manager said and as Tony just explained, doesn't really go directly to this plan For example, this plan works in conjunction with, most notably, the housing element of the general plan. The housing element and the RHNA, the regional housing allocation numbers that we're required to have, those require us to have housing throughout the income strata. So throughout the spectrum, we need to be providing housing both at the affordable levels, but at levels that are throughout the income spectrum. So that when we say that this document works in conjunction with other documents, what we're really talking about is the housing element and the other elements that talk about housing in the general plan. It's not going to be this document and these policies specifically.
Okay, so we are going to be having, and I don't like to use the word affordable because what some person's definition of affordable is not what a lot of residents consider affordable. When you've got families looking for, I've got 3 kids and I'm looking for a 1-bedroom apartment for $1,500. There's nothing out there. And these families are having to double up and triple up. And yes, the easy answer would be, well, just move. Why are you living in California? It's expensive to live here. But that's just not as easy as packing up and moving out of state. And so I just feel like I want to make sure that we are having housing, whether it be apartments or, really push first-time home buyers as people move up the economic scale and move into the upscale housing, that we have single-family homes still available for, first-time home buyers that they can afford, and the apartments, because we have a lot of service workers here in El Cajon, a lot of people who work in the restaurants and work in the fast food industry, that they have to live here because, they want us out of our cars, so they've got to live where they work. And right now, the housing is just not available for those workers. So I just wanted to get that clarification. Thank you.
One thing I want to point out, that's part of the housing mix that we're supposed to have, low income. But one of the things that we're missing, particularly on the valley floor, is upscale, nice apartments and condos. I'm talking to paint a picture for you. You have granite countertops. You have tile in the bath. The central air conditioning. Tile entryways and maybe tile living rooms. Something that you might find up in University Town Center. And yes, they do rent for a lot of money and they sell for a lot of money. But these are people that have a lot of disposable income that can come down to Main Street and have the money to be able to go into a cafe or a business to revitalize our downtown. And a place where people can aspire to go to and still stay in the city. The move up housing, but a little bit more urban than, let's say, Fletcher Hills.
Steve?
I like the idea of targeted industries that was in the staff report. Information technology, medical devices, biopharm, real estate, construction development, aerospace to connect with the airport. My question is on health services. Do you mean clinics or do you mean subscriber-based organizations? Because they're 2 different kind of things, and we seem to have a lot of clinics in El Cajon.
So good afternoon, Mayor Wells, members of the council. I'm Roger Dale with the Nattlesondale Group, and excited to be back here with you again after our meeting in March. So it's a good question. When we look at target industries, we divide them into 2 different categories. One we call local clusters, and the other we call traded clusters. And health services, as is defined in our analysis, is a local serving cluster. And that showed up in our data as something that El Cajon has a strength in and it could potentially be built on. So that would include kind of patient-focused health services, businesses, clinics, et cetera, hospitals, et cetera. I should point out, however, there's also a separate category called biopharmaceuticals, which is not local serving. It's one of the what we call a traded cluster, which the definition of that is an industry that produces goods or services that are exported beyond the city or even beyond the region. And so that might be more of the type of thing you're talking about, but I just wanted to point out that both of those are included here for different reasons.
Okay, thank you. My feedback to staff would be careful about these local stuff. I don't know that we want to have an over-concentration, so then a person has 4 choices to go to. We want to serve every segment of our city, but we want to be careful not to go too heavy on a particular segment, would be my feedback. Finally, my question would be, how do you address older properties that, we'll say, the greatest generation owns, and as they pass on, they give to their baby boomer children? And this could be commercial property, this could be industrial property, this could be an apartment complex. How do you factor in, are there opportunities, because what if the baby boomer child doesn't want to own that industrial property, doesn't want that commercial property, doesn't want that apartment complex? Is that a target for economic development to renew? How would you address that?
Well, we do address that in here, and as staff pointed out, we make a distinction between residential and industrial properties in those categories. And I know that they're both important challenges from the city's perspective, but the economic development strategy is primarily focused on activities that will increase employment, increase business investment, and ultimately increase the city's tax base. One of the challenges when we talk about target industries is that attracting new businesses, you need to have space to accommodate them. And like many places in San Diego County, El Cajon doesn't have a lot of vacant land left to build new business parks. So one of the key strategies here is to look at opportunities like industrial areas that are ripe for reinvestment, revitalization, or repurposing of the land for newer industrial facilities. That would include the very category you're talking about, where you've got older properties, and it's not necessarily a case where it's an inherited property. It could be just a long-standing owner that has no real incentive to change the use of it, and so it's maybe an underutilized property from the larger perspective, but from their point of view, it makes sense just to keep it kind of as it is because they've got some income from it, and there's not a lot of risk involved at this point in just maintaining it. And that type of scenario gets even more challenging when it's a second generation that have perhaps even less interest in reinvesting in it. This strategic plan provides a policy framework where the city would reach out to those property owners and see where there might be opportunities to incentivize higher use of those properties. Again, focus in this case primarily on industrial. We fully understand the importance of strong residential neighborhoods, but that really, in our experience, is better addressed by other departments or policies within a city. One of the issues that we've identified here is the need for additional staffing focused on or devoted full-time to economic development, which the city at this point it doesn't have a full-time person with just that, wearing just that hat. In any event, there would be a concern about diluting that staff's attention to things that don't have that laser focus on business development. So that's kind of the line we've drawn here.
I think the sentence I tracked in on was we would do outreach to those property owners who might be second generation to have a more higher use of property. That would be a good thing to do. I agree with you on the residential side that we address it a different way. I would call that community value rather than economic value. There's community value to have a better looking apartment complex. And we address some of those things through our code enforcement and property inspection programs, that we don't want our lower income or really any income living in conditions where their landlord is not taking care of the property. That's not fair. And so we address those deficiencies, such as a stairwell that's not attached to the second landing through code enforcement, and we ensure a higher standard of living on residential through that process. But I zeroed in on that one sentence for industrial and commercial.
Councilmember Goebel, you make a good point, because a lot of people don't realize that the voters voted out the parent-child exclusion, which affects commercial property. And so when they pass away, the heirs could see a property tax bill that's 10 times or more what it used to be. So there is probably an incentive for them to do something with that property, or make sure that it's at highest and best use. But I had a question for our speaker regarding ultra-high-speed internet. Is that something that's viable for the city to subsidize the establishment of that, to bring in high-tech businesses?
That is something that we have not investigated at this level. As staff mentioned, this is kind of a broad policy framework or document. That there is a component of this that would involve infrastructure investment, and looking at high-speed internet access would certainly be a key component of that. We have not done yet the kind of cost-benefit analysis you're talking about. Is there potentially a payoff in terms of business development? That would come as part of the implementation of this strategy. And so it's covered in here, but not at the level of specific analysis yet, but that we would see that as potentially a priority as part of implementation.
I think that. I was
Yes, sir.
just going to comment. We haven't, as Mr. Dale indicated, we haven't had a deep dive into this. But when we were looking at how to allocate ARPA monies, that's one of the big pushes from the administration is broadband expansion. And so we did actually reach out to a lot of users in our business parks to see, was there a need for an upgrade? And surprisingly, we have a pretty robust pipeline out there. But I think we need to dig a little bit deeper. But I'm actually really pleased that I think we're pretty good technology-wise from an infrastructure perspective.
Yeah, that might be a good place to put some of this one-time money into it, because we don't have to keep out putting more and more money like if we hired somebody. But if it may work out to partner with one of the companies, so if we can create a situation where that robust internet is very attractive to new businesses and some of the cutting edge technologies, because they tend to employ people that make a lot of money. And then again, on the medical side, for let's say certain areas of downtown, certain areas of the city, all of us are baby boomers except Phil, and we go to see the doctor a lot now. And I think as the baby boomers get older, I'd like to go to a clinic in El Cajon. I don't want to drive all the way down to Claremont to Kaiser, but they have good paying jobs with the doctors and the nurses and nurse practitioners. And those buildings they need, they're very expensive to build because all the oxygen and piping and special plumbing and electricity. And there really isn't any place like that in El Cajon. We're just starting to get a little bit of that here at the southwest corner, and then it gets a clinic down on El Cajon Boulevard towards Interstate 8. But that may be something that can bring people in, and they might be the people that buy the upscale housing that we put right next door or above it or behind it. And so it creates kind of this synergy of where you have people making lots of money that want to live near where they work, maybe even walking distance, and get back to more of a traditional downtown that might be a little bit, buildings might be a little bit higher, but you have, a service where people make good money and could go down to the cafe or, all that. So, we have a great potential down here, and especially with the a trolley coming into town. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at.
Yes, I agree, and that is one of the reasons that we included healthcare or health services on our list, because it's not only a job creator, but it's an amenity in the community that attracts other activities. It's kind of part of your infrastructure for other economic development activities.
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments. Thank you very much for all the work you've done regarding this, and including staff. 30,000-foot view for the public. It's vital to understand. I know we talk a lot about economic development and developers and things like this, but this is vital for the public to understand that if we don't invest in the economic development of our city, the only other way for us to get revenue to pay for fire, to pay for police, to pay for community services is for us to raise taxes. That's the only other way. And I think, personally, that's lazy lawmaking. It's just raising taxes on our citizens who are already burdened in economically depressed economy. So the way we increase revenue without putting that burden on our residents is by hiring a consultant, by looking at our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, our threats with regard to what are the open lots that we could develop. How come people aren't coming in? How can we attract people to build condos to get people from the lower income to the middle income? I'm a product of that. That's how I was able to enter from lower class to middle class, is a condo. They're cheaper. So for the public's perspective, this is I believe, philosophically, the best way we can move our city forward is by not raising taxes on our citizens, coming together with experts, and determining how can we create more jobs, create more business, which is going to increase sales tax revenue, like we just talked about. I love our assistant city manager's comment. This is not set in stone. There's going to be some back and forth with council. I think that needs to happen. There needs to be synchronicity between decisions that are made, especially big ones. So I'm a big fan of that. Working with developers. What are the developers' pain points? Why won't you build here? Why is it so difficult for XYZ reasons? Do you need a financial incentive? Do you need flexible zoning? Do you need talk to us. Let us know how we can work with you as a city. To dovetail off of that, the number one reason why housing is so expensive is because of state building code and state energy code. That is the number one reason why housing is so expensive. The number one contributor is energy code. That's why it's so expensive. There are so many rules and regulations that these people who are trying to build a home have to comply with. So we do our best here in the city to stem that, to try and say, we're not going to have a lot of regulations for you because the state already does a ton. And then also, I firmly believe that downtown El Cajon can be just as nice, if not nicer, than downtown La Mesa or 3rd Street in Chula Vista. I think it has the potential for that, mainly because we have the Magnolia here, which is a premier, one of the premier concert venues in East County. And then Parkway Plaza. I would love to see something like a Paseo 1 project, like in Del Mar, where it's an experience that people come to, with housing there and shops and restaurants, and it's a destination, like we've been saying, where we attract people from outside of the city to come spend their dollars in El Cajon. We take the sales tax from that, and then we can better help our citizens and better serve our citizens. So, ongoing conversation, outstanding work. I think we're on the right track. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Thanks. Just a question. You mentioned biopharmaceuticals or something. Are we talking about compounding pharmacies, or are we talking about more of the development of new drugs?
It could be both. We define these industries based on a national model that groups a bunch of different industries into these definitions of what we call clusters. And biopharmaceuticals would include both of the types of things you've talked about. It's kind of a broad heading for that type of activity. I think specifically and this was based on the input we got from stakeholders locally, if you think of the types of industries that are concentrated around Carlsbad and that part of the county that might expand to this part of the county, that might be a target. So those would be the types of industries or firms that we're thinking about. But it could be broader than that. And the way the opportunity plays out will kind of is yet to be determined.
No, we're always looking for industry to come in and kind of revitalize some of these blighted areas. I mean, people have the kind of money that can buy up old buildings and build, just like we've seen on Broadway and Second, where the old Vons is, with the Awaken Church, and across the street the nice PACE program. I think we got kind of lucky when Darrell Priest built that large building on the corner over here, sat empty for 3 years, and finally Borrego Healthcare came in, a federal qualified health clinic, filled it up with seeing 60,000 patients a month. And right after that, we've got San Ysidro Healthcare built a big new facility, Family Healthcare, La Maestra. There's lots of federally qualified health clinics that have decided to call El Cajon home. I think we can capitalize on that, especially if we are able to prevail upon Kaiser to build soon, and really start looking at medical office buildings, compounding pharmacies, other pharmacies, durable medical equipment, all the other ancillary services that come along with it. We may have a niche here, which I think I'd be fine with, because that's certainly going to bring in more restaurants to service these people, more people that want to come in and build affordable housing for the doctors, nurses, and techs that come along with that. So, that's just my 2 cents. I know you've already thought about this, but I just
thank you.
Think it's interesting. Thank you for coming, and thanks for your knowledge and for your helping us.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to work with the city and all of you. Okay, great. So, Angela, do we have any speaker cards on this item?
No speaker cards, sir.
Okay. Then I bring it back to the council. Any more discussion or questions, or somebody like to make a motion? Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
All right, there are no commission reports on today's agenda. Item 9 is my activities report. And now we're at activities reports of council members. Councilmember Kendrick.
As reported.
Councilmember Goebel.
As reported, a couple of comments. Saturday, the Amicus emergency cabins reached a milestone in which the exterior was completed. And so they are ready for building inspections. I think hopefully they'll be contacting our inspectors soon so that they can put the inside insulation and things on. Those are 6 cabins. They're painted all sorts of bright colors, and they're ready to serve homeless women and homeless women with children. So I think the idea is to finish that by July 31st. I'm very excited to add another tool into our expanding tool chest of services that we offer the homeless. I'm also still impressed with the staff and the response to keeping the city clean. Just today, I reported some graffiti about noon today on some walls on East Main underneath the 8 overpass at 3rd Street by East County Transitional Living Center. Got a notification at 4 o'clock. It's already been painted over. So that system of reporting and the vendor we have, and that it's working and it's keeping El Cajon clean, which is good. Finally, the advanced water purification. We are having some ongoing discussions with the city of San Diego. It's not moving as fast as we would like. They missed a deadline last Friday that they told us. So we are looking to move a little bit more proactively in the coming weeks, because the citizens of East County can't wait for the bureaucracy of the city of San Diego. We'll do what we can to be a good partner in this in terms of how we can work together, but we can't make 500,000 people in East County wait till the city of San Diego coordinates all of their efforts.
They have been historically slow on this. Mr. Ortiz. Ms. Mitchell.
As reported, with one exception, my 622 meeting with the Downtown Partnership was canceled last week. It is rescheduled for tomorrow.
Okay. There are no general information items on today's agenda. There are no first or second readings of ordinances on today's agenda. And that brings us to closed session. The city attorney will recite the title and lead us into the closed session.
This is a conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to paragraph 1 of subdivision D of Government Code section 54956.9. To Eric Bidwell et al. V. the City of El Cajon et al. And it's in the United States District Court, Southern District of California, case number 16-CV-2575-LL-MSB, and Carrie Mitchell from the city's litigation firm, McDougall Love, is going to cover this closed session.
Thank you. I'll make a motion then to adjourn the closed session. Please vote.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go closed session. I'll come back and finish the meeting. It shouldn't take very long. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back from closed session. I will defer to the city attorney to report on the goings-on of closed session.
Ms. Mitchell, Carrie, we need you to report on closed session since Ms. Luck was not in closed session.
She can probably use the podium.
The city council gave direction.
That suffices.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, this brings us to adjournment, the adjourned regular joint meeting of the El Cajon City Council, El Cajon Housing Authority, successor agency to the El Cajon Redevelopment Agency, held this 28th day of June 2022, is adjourned until Tuesday, July 12th, 2022 at 3 o'clock p.m. Thank you very much.